Shishi Radha Damodar Juki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatar Shata Shishimar Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Gosai Maharaj Shila Gurudev Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatar Shata Shishimar Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatar Shata Shishimar Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Shatara Shata Shishimar Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nityalila Pravishtam Vishnupad Shatara Shata Shishimar Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nityalila Pravishta Maha Bhagavat Shilagorksharas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nityalila Pravishta Shila Satchitaranda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Shila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shila Baladev Vijabhushan Prabhu Ki Jai. Shila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Nartham Srinivas Shamananda Prabhu Trai Ki Jai. Shila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami Par Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Bhattadash Raghunath Shar Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai. Namachaya Shila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaura Mandal Vraja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Yamuna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Vaman Dev Ki Jai. Shri Vaman Dwadashi Ki Jai. Titi Palan Kari Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shila Jiva Goswami Par Ki Jai. Tadiya Shubha Abhirbhav Titi Ki Jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. For some of you in the world, I think it's Akadashi, right? Here it's Mahadvadashi. So Shri Akadashi or Mahadvadashi Titi Ki Jai. Shri Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shinitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Dandavat Pranams. So I just read this amazing article on this topic about whether bhakti is inherent in the jiva or if it is bestowed on the jiva, if it is inherited. And usually when I hear people discussing this topic, it's so unclear. Like the way people present it, it's just so not convoluted, and it's really difficult to follow along. And finally, somebody wrote this Mataji named Vṛndāraṇya dāsī. She wrote a very strong and very clear and pleasant to read article on this topic. Because so much has been written about how Srila Jiva Goswami presents in his Sandarbhas how bhakti is bestowed. But not many people have written about how he writes about how bhakti is inherent. And so she'll be focusing on that in her articles. And today, as an offering to Srila Jiva Goswami on his appearance day, she published the first in a series. So I want to read all the articles as they come out, but here is the first one. All right, let me share my screen. And by the way, you can find this on the harmonist.us.com. If you go to that website, it'll be the first article that's there. All right. The Simultaneous Inherency and Bestowal of Bhakti, Part 1. The history of the debate. And so this was published today, Srila Jiva Goswami's appearance day. One second, let me just make the screen a little less bright. Okay. Is bhakti bestowed upon a jiva by God or a devotee at some point in material time? Or is it already part of the jiva's constitutional nature, albeit covered by Maya? Or can it be both, in which case bhakti is inherent but needs to be bestowed because the jiva is covered by Maya and thus lost to his true nature? Oh, and when she refers to the jiva, she uses the word his because she explains because many other people. Anyways, should we read the footnote? Anyways, yeah, jiva could also be referred to as her, but she's just for making it simple, she's referring to as his. Bhaktivinoda Thakur expressed the third option, that it is both. And following his lead, so have those in his parivar. During the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the well-known Radharaman Charan Das Babaji, among others, agreed with Bhaktivinoda Thakur's interpretation of Jiva Goswami Sandarbhas concerning this topic. For example, he wrote, Similarly, one has only to remove the impurity of the heart by means of sadhan bhakti to see and feel that prem is already there. That said, not all Gaudiya Parivars embraced this understanding. Nonetheless, there is no evidence I'm aware of that anyone objected to Bhaktivinoda Thakur's interpretation during his own time. And as we shall see, the Thakur clearly derives his interpretation of Jiva Goswami from previous acharyas such as Baladev Vijabhushan and his Madhva heritage, which the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya lineage is derived from in some respects. Furthermore, I will show in my fourth article Bhaktivinoda Thakur's interpretation runs through the other four Vaishnava Sampradayas as well. Cool. Thus, we should be clear that non-inherency versus simultaneous bestowal is not a debate in which Jiva Goswami and the rest of the Gaudiya Sampradaya are on one side of the divide, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his parivar are standalone on the other side. They don't stand on opposing sides. Although the example I gave in the previous paragraph refers to the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the same holds true after his disappearance. For example, David L. Haberman states in his groundbreaking work within academia, Acting as a Way of Salvation, that when researching his book in Vraj, he came across two distinct perspectives embraced by Gaudiya sadhus in regard to the Siddha Deha, inherent and non-inherent. It is notable that he was referring to parivars other than that of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Dr. Mahanambrat Brahmachari, who traveled to the United States from India in 1933, did a PhD thesis called Vaishnav Vedanta, the philosophy of Sri Jiva Goswami, for the University of Chicago, and became a mentor of Thomas Merton. In this deeply philosophical dissertation, the author presents an implicitly inherent and bestowed perspective. In a more recent academic publication, Barbara A. Holdridge, in her well-researched and insightful Bhakti and Embodiment, also implicitly takes an inherent and bestowed perspective regarding the meditative Siddha Deha of the aspiring devotee. Another example is the modern-day representative of the Nityananda Vangsha, Sri Prem Gopal Goswami, who takes the side of simultaneous inherency and bestowal in his recent book, Nitai Padakamala. He writes, your particular relationship, be it in a friendly mood or in parental mood or in the mood of a beloved, will appear after you start your sadhan. Then you will feel attachment. Guru will not install them. They are inherent. They will develop inside you. I'm just seeing if anybody's here watching. Haribol, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Rose, Haribol, Dandavat Pranam. Krishna Vallabha, sorry. However, when Jiva Goswami's Sandarbhas were first published in English, some devotees in parivars outside the Bhaktivinoda parivar questioned, based on the Sandarbhas, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's writings that states that bhakti is the jiva's swabhav, natural state or constitution, and particularly that the jiva's siddhadeha is inherent within a jiva. Those within the Bhaktivinoda Thakur parivar have mostly discounted these questions, but some have argued in support of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's position, and thus a debate has raged on for years, mostly on internet forums. While most of those in the Bhaktivinoda parivar have continued to support simultaneous inherency and bestowal, some have modified their positions, particularly those who have closely examined the arguments of the opposing side. For example, some have a qualified understanding of simultaneous inherency and bestowal. Some have argued that bhakti is bestowed and not inherent, and thus there must be a reason why Bhaktivinoda Thakur preached this understanding, and a few have even left his parivar altogether. My inspiration for these series of articles was another series of articles by Swami Padmanabha published on the Harmonist website, as well as several podcasts in which he expresses an openness to, how do you say this word? Socratic dialogue on the topic of whether bhakti is inherent or inherited, as well as a podcast and in-depth presentation made by Sundar Gopal Das that answer that call for dialogue. Okay, I guess Socratic dialogue means, let me just look it up. Sorry, guys. I like to know what I'm reading. A Socratic dialogue is a genre of literary prose developed in Greece. Whatever. It's a okay. The Socratic method is a form of cooperative argumentative dialogue between individuals based on asking and answering questions. Okay, got it. So Sundar Gopal answered that call for dialogue. Swami Padmanabha's position was that bhakti is not inherent, and he thus opines that only Bhaktivinoda Thakur's statements that establish that bhakti is bestowed are in full alignment with Jiva Goswami, and those statements that indicate inherency beg for proper reconciliation. Okay, those statements of Bhaktivinoda Thakur that indicate inherency beg for proper reconciliation. He argues that the primary meaning of such statements is inappropriate because he asserts that Jiva Goswami is unequivocal that bhakti is not inherent. As I was writing this series of articles, Swami Padmanabha came out with a book, Inherent or Inherited, based on his series of articles from the Harmonist, this website, harmonist.us. In his presentation based on research for his PhD dissertation at the University of Oxford, Sundar Gopal Das upheld that Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that bhakti is both inherent and bestowed. Vigorously disagreeing with Swami Padmanabha's contention that Bhaktivinoda Thakur's position was merely a preaching strategy, Sundar Gopal provided extensive evidence to establish that Bhaktivinoda Thakur's statements that bhakti is the dharma of the soul, Jaiva Dharma, was not a provisional concept, but rather a foundational aspect of his teachings. He also gave historical evidence that Bhaktivinoda Thakur had studied Jiva Goswami's Sandarbhas extensively, thereby dispelling any doubt that Bhaktivinoda Thakur might not have been aware of Jiva Goswami's position. Perhaps the most groundbreaking revelation of Sundar Gopal's presentation was that Sri Jamatri Muni, whose verses form the basis of Jiva Goswami's explanation of the characteristics of the Jiva, also maintains that bhakti is inherent as well as bestowed. Furthermore, Sundar Gopal substantiated that while Bhaktivinoda Thakur was in Jagannath Puri, he studied Jamatri Muni's books under the guidance of scholars in his line. Sundar Gopal also discussed the different types of inherency in both the Western and Vedic traditions, and he presented the revolutionary idea that the inherency that Bhaktivinoda Thakur spoke of is a teleological inherence, the purpose for which something exists. Teleological means the purpose for which something exists. So like a seed, the purpose of a seed is to grow into a tree. So the purpose is there. That's the teleological inheritance. It's not saying that the tree is in the seed, but the purpose to become a tree is in the seed, right? On account of, what's this word? Preponderance. Oh, God. I need to look up this word. One second. Preponderance means the quality or fact of being greater in number, quantity, or importance. The fact of being greater in importance. Okay. On account of a preponderance of evidence, Sundar Gopal was successful in establishing that Bhaktivinoda Thakur held a deeply reasoned conviction that bhakti is both inherent and bestowed. Indeed, after this presentation, Swami Padmanabha adjusted his stance on whether Bhaktivinoda Thakur's position was a preaching strategy. Nonetheless, although Swami Padmanabha came up with a few alternative suggestions as to why Bhaktivinoda Thakur would present something that Swami Padmanabha felt differed from Jiva Goswami, such reasons fell short in answering why Bhaktivinoda Thakur preached both inherency and bestowal. About the revelation that Jamatri Muni maintains that bhakti is inherent as well as bestowed, Swami Padmanabha argued that Sri Jamatri Muni's understanding of his own verses was irrelevant because it is untenable to conclude that Sri Jiva Goswami is in full agreement with the Muni's opinion, even in the specific cases when he quotes him. That doesn't make any sense. Like, why? Anyways, whatever. He quotes him and says, but then I don't agree with this, but I'm just sharing it here for the heck of it. Like, anyways, I'm sure Padmanabha Swami explains in his articles more about that. I've actually read some of these things, but still, it's. Furthermore, Swami Padmanabha held firm in emphatically dismissing the notion that bhakti could be inherent. What we find here is a totally unclear and convoluted notion, the idea of remembering or regaining one's swarup. That's his writing. He even suggests that Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself cancels such a possibility within his statements that bhakti is bestowed. He cancels such a possibility with his statements that bhakti is bestowed. Swami concludes by affirming, but one thing remains beyond question. The undisputed and consensual siddhanta of the Gaudiya Sampradaya is that bhakti is not inherent in the jiva, neither physically, nor etiologically, nor teleologically. Although Swami Padmanabha provided impressive support that bhakti is bestowed, the problem with his approach was that the support for the bestowal of bhakti was not under contention. Nobody is contending that bhakti is bestowed, at least not by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Comprehensively answering the question of whether bhakti is both bestowed and inherent is not a simple matter of producing quotations that support the point that bhakti is bestowed. There are quotations that support both inherency and bestowal for the simple reason that Srila Jiva Goswami and, following in his lead, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur established that bhakti is simultaneously inherent and bestowed. Therefore, producing hundreds of quotations to establish that bhakti is bestowed does not settle the argument, because both sides agree on that point. Yes, fully agree with all the hundreds of quotes that bhakti is bestowed. Yes, bhakti is bestowed. Furthermore, I was rankled. What's rankled? I just kind of get the idea. Rankled means cause continuing annoyance or resentment. Okay. So furthermore, I was rankled by Swami Padmanabha's contention that he was bringing Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Jiva Goswami closer together by presenting different ways of appreciating Bhaktivinoda Thakur's understanding that were in line with Jiva Goswami's ultimate intention. As far as I was concerned, Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Jiva Goswami were already in perfect alignment, and it was Swami Padmanabha's understanding that needed adjustment. Moreover, I had always found certain implications of the bestowal-only argument to be distasteful. Oh my God, I can so resonate with this. This really resonates with me. For example, the bestowal only argument holds that the soul has no inherent knowledge or ananda, only consciousness and a lack of material suffering. Isn't that so Mayavad? There's just consciousness and a lack of material suffering, but there's no ananda, no inherent ananda. Thus, essentially, this understanding posits that the soul is impersonal. The soul is impersonal without the bestowal of bhakti. It holds that the soul is simply a quantum of consciousness that powers a material or spiritual body, much like a battery that powers a car. As such, the soul does not constitutionally have any personality at all. Its personhood in the state of perfection, such an interpretation postulates, resides in the Siddha Deha and its Shaktis, which this theory understands to be constitutionally different than the soul. This argument further holds that the soul never actually contacts the Siddha Deha directly, because in this understanding, such contact would cause the soul to transform. Thus, essentially, the theory considers that after an eternity of wandering in the material world, the sojourn of the jiva culminates in merely identifying with something other than what it is. Isn't that the most depressing idea? Sorry, I need to stop my own commentary. It was, one second. Haribol Gargarajji and Ganga Didi. It was for these reasons that I began considering how I might respond to the contention of Swami Padmanabha that the undisputed and consensual siddhanta of the Gaudiya Sampradaya is that bhakti is not inherent in the jiva. I thought that something that had not been done was to show how Jiva Goswami establishes the inherency of bhakti in the Sandarbhas. As the bestowal of bhakti has already been shown by Swami Padmanabha and others, this addition would show that Jiva Goswami established both inherency and bestowal of bhakti in the Sandarbhas. Such an undertaking would thus add considerable weight to the argument that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was perfectly in line with Jiva Goswami. In the scriptures, there are many apparently contradictory concepts. For example, that God has a form and is formless, and that we are one with God as well as different from God. Statements about the inherency and bestowal of bhakti are similar. Although the statements seem contradictory, you can find many instances of both. The genius of the acharyas of Vaishnava Vedanta, as opposed to the understanding of Shankaracharya, is that they embrace scripture in its entirety rather than asserting that some scriptural statements cancel out other statements, as Swami Padmanabha did when he suggested that Bhaktivinoda Thakur cancels the possibility of inherency with his statements that bhakti is bestowed. It took me a year to complete my undertaking. I am posting this article on the auspicious appearance day of Srila Jiva Goswami, a perfect day to begin my humble attempt to serve the devotees by elucidating his Sandarbhas. Tomorrow is the appearance day of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, whose profound insight was the inspiration and guiding force of my writing. On this day, I will present a summary of the points. I will present a summary of the points I will make in the articles that will follow. I pray that my articles may please these two great Vaishnavas, as well as the devotees who read this series. Please keep in mind that the Sandarbhas can be abstract, terse, and difficult to comprehend. As such, a substantial argument based on the Sandarbhas will also be similarly challenging. In this regard, as well as from any shortcomings in my presentation, I beg the indulgence of my readers. So let's see. These are the articles that she'll publish. So, additional articles in the series. Part 1, The History of a Debate. Part 2, A Roadmap. Part 3, The Swan. Part 4, Vaishnava Vedanta. Part 5, The 21 Attributes of the Jiva. Part 6, The Search for Bliss. Part 7, The Soul is a Servant of Bhagavan Hari. Part 8, a servant of God, Sheshatva. Part 9, unmanifest qualities of the soul. Part 10, intrinsically of the nature of knowledge and bliss. Part 11, Jiva Goswami on Tatastha Shakti. Part 12, understanding Shakti. Part 13, the bliss of the Jiva. Part 14, the soul is not subject to transformation. Part 15, identity, oneness, Tadatmya. Part 16, the manifestation of Shakti. Part 17, Baladev Vijayabhushan's Govinda Bhashya. And Part 18, concluding words. Wow. So I will read all these articles as they come out on here live on Facebook. It looks like, wait, this part 1 we already read, right? That's what we just read now, I think. But it looks like part 2 is already out. Let me just check this out. It says page not found. Anyhow. Yeah, and this part 1 we already read. All right. I mean, that's what we just read. All right. I'm curious to hear any of your thoughts on this issue. If anybody has anything to share. Let me share the link. I'm reading this article by Vṛndāraṇya dāsī, which she's a disciple of Tripurari Maharaj, and she published this on Harmonist. Here, I'll just type it out so you can see. Harmonist.us. Go to harmonist.us. And it should be there, I think. Hey, where is it? Oh, I don't see it. Yeah, I don't see the article. Oh, it's right here. It's featured right here. So let me just post this so that you can have the article. All right. Dandavat pranams, everybody. So I hope that made the topic a little bit more clear. That's just something that was so refreshing reading this, because I've heard lots of debate. I've read a lot of Padmanabha Swami's articles. I've heard lots of people speak on it. And every time I read anything or hear anything, the way that it's presented is very unclear. And yeah, so it was just so nice to be able to read something that was easy to understand for once. All right, I'm curious to hear all of your thoughts though. So I'm going to end now. Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Shri Jiva Goswami Pad ki Jai, Jai Shri Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki Jai, Jai Shri Gurudev ki Jai, Jai Shri Param Gurudev ki Jai, Jai Shri Prabhupada ki Jai, Shri Rupano Gauriya Guru Varga ki Jai, Swaparsha Shri Gaur Nityananda Prabhu ki Jai, Shri Gaur Hari ki Jai, Hari Nam Sankirtan ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai, Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Oh, there's a question here. Okay. So Madhavendra was asking, what is the significance in discussing these things? Won't it just lead to more confusion? Well, the problem is, I mean, in all of our Acharya's writings, it's so clear. And it's something I've understood, I've just understood it my whole life since I was a kid. Like it's so clearly written throughout Jaiva Dharma and all of Srila Prabhupada's writings and all of my Gurudev's teachings and all that there's something in us. We're not just these like impersonal shells of consciousness just floating without any kind of anything positive within us, just this like Maya. But now this I wrote and I made a video on this topic. But anyhow, this is now being propagated everywhere, and everybody's starting to think that, maybe we don't have anything within us, that that we're these empty shells of consciousness that need to be filled with something, that need to be filled with. And so it's been causing a lot of confusion and making lots of devotees lose faith. Actually, there's instances, there's one of the most senior devotees in my Gurudev Sangha, well, not one of the most senior, but like one of the main people who was heading up the publications. I think probably the main person in GVP. He left our line, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's line, entirely over this issue, and went to the Babaji's. And so it's been causing a lot of confusion and doubt in many devotees. And so that's why it's important for us to understand, and because it's such an essential part of our Acharya's teachings. It's that, I mean, that's why our Acharyas write about it so much. That's why Srila Prabhupada, that they're helping us awaken within us this our like this is what our nature is. And so it comes to like the very core of our philosophy. And so it's very important to be able to understand this topic and get deep into it, because it's like the core of our philosophy. Sorry, I was rambling there, but I'm just reading Krishna Vallabha's comments. She said, I've always understood that bhakti is natural for us. The soul is the son, daughter of the Divine Mother, Father. So love is natural for us. However, when a disciple follows sweetly and cries, it is naturally awakened. Exactly. Yes, bhakti is in your veins. Anyway, Madhavendra, I think my own confusion, I think it's my own confusion because Srila Gurudev is my Shiksha Guru and Swami Tripurari is as well. So it makes me feel torn. Well, I mean, this Vṛndāraṇya dāsī, she is a disciple of she's your god sister. And so I wonder really what his conclusion is on the matter. He said something about it before, but I'm wondering with this article, does he agree with Vṛndāraṇya on any of these points? I would be curious to hear what his position is now. It's, yeah, actually, if you find out, let me know, because if he disagrees with her or if he agrees with her or what his position is now. I would be very curious to know. All right, so I'm going to end this video for now. And yeah, see you tomorrow for Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Appearance Day. All right, Dandavat pranams, everybody. Hari Bol.